mitigate. Now, Amoonguss can be a really key piece for that. While Amoonguss is on the field, much harder to find damage with Surging Strikes, but to keep Amoonguss on the field, you've got to worry about Chien-Pao already sitting there next to Urshifu.
No Amoonguss to start things out, though. Instead, it's the Chien-Pao and this Urshifu for Sebastian. Cresselia and Incineroar right away for Colin. And Cresselia, this can be an interesting one because a little bit more supportive, but you want to try Twitch mentions or go out on the offense?
Yeah, I think either way, Cresselia feels fairly comfortable here, has Fake Out support next to it, no Dark, only Sucker Punch on the Chien-Pao, so probably no real Dark threat into Cresselia, and with Intimidate on top of that, Cresselia probably feels fairly safe. There's no way on this turn to have both Sword of Ruin and Rain as well, so you know those Surging Strikes aren't going to be like a crazy amount of damage, and you can Fake Out the Urshifu if you really want to prevent that. So Cresselia here can then get a choice. Does it want to Icy Wind to lower speed? Does it want to Trick Room to switch the speed advantage? And yeah, Chien-Pao doesn't like that Intimidate, doesn't want to be on the field against these Pokemon, so instead a switch out for Amoonguss instead.
And if you think it is going to be a little bit more of a telegraphed play, you have the Incineroar for the Fake Out, you have the Cresselia for the Trick Room, trying to like pose to be a little bit better within those slower dimensions, you bring the Amoonguss out. Of course, the Urshifu, we do get to see it go on the offensive, but this Urshifu, with it being the Choice Scarf set and no Rain, it's not necessarily that same amount of damage you would anticipate coming out from the Urshifu. Cresselia takes the hit so comfortably, and this is where we can see the Trick Room go up, but where do you go from here?
Yeah, Trick Room is up, but now Amoonguss is on the field, threatening a Spore into the Incineroar slot. We've seen Colin play pretty loose with this Grass Terrestrialization on Incineroar, threatening it but not using it. In the last match, we saw that prevent a Spore into that slot. This time, Urshifu chooses to Surging Strikes into Cresselia, not into Incineroar, which might have been a KO there. You're once again threatening it, but you'd really like to get Ursaluna on the field, but Ursaluna is not yet burnt. So switching into either spot risks switching it into a Spore, which is, you know, not what you want to get out of the situation. I wonder if Cresselia now also just starts to go out on the offense. It has two pretty juicy Psychic targets on the other side, no threat of Sucker Punch, not threatened by Spore itself because of safety goggles. So one way to make use of the Trick Room is to let Cresselia go on the offense. Cresselia also, though, weakened. If you know this is going to be a longer game, you might want to make sure and keep Cresselia's health up.
Well, if you're not necessarily too scared about the damage that Urshifu is doing, and you have this Grass Terrestrialization to mitigate any potential of a Spore from the Amoonguss, you can maybe afford to play a little bit slower on these next couple of turns. And you had called out that Colin has played, you know, kind of like with the temptation of this Grass Terrestrialization, but we finally get to see it spent. Nothing from the Amoonguss, though, instead just opting to protect on this turn. So, yeah, Terrestrialization spent. No real threat from the Amoonguss, and a pivot out.
This is a way to navigate the Spore, right? Because the Amoonguss would have moved first, then you can U-turn after to remove the threat of Spore, but it doesn't remove the threat of his Surging Strikes. It's going to be really key to see where this Urshifu is targeting this turn.
That's going to be the thing, because if it's into the Cresselia, we saw how little damage it kind of did, right? Not even bringing it down to half. But if this is into the other slot, well, that's going to be a world of difference. Ursaluna hits the field, and Surging Strikes headed its way. 1, 2, 3 hits. Ursaluna is out of here.
The hard part with Ursaluna is step 2. Because step 1 with Ursaluna is set up your Trick Room. Step 2 is get Ursaluna on the field, and that is often the stumbling point for many players. This time, Colin very focused on navigating the threat of the Spore, uses the Grass Terrestrialization with the U-turn to not worry about that. But then there's still an Urshifu on the other side. Surging Strikes just KOs Ursaluna and establishes a massive lead for Sebastian. Also, that Trick Room, already 2 turns of it gone past. Amoonguss still comfortably on the other side, and not a ton of damage threat in this position. You can like Psychic and Flare Blitz after the Amoonguss if you want, but you're just burning through turns, and you're probably going to take quite a bit of damage back because Amoonguss will move first with Sludge Bomb. You also don't know if Amoonguss is staying on the field. So Colin's by no means out of it, but this is a rough opening for him. He's going to have to figure out where that damage is coming from now that it's not coming from the Ursaluna that went down on the switch in.
And it looked better when it was, you know, we talked about these being juicy targets for the Cresselia with the Psychic, but now that you're down to Pokemon and these turns of Trick Room are dwindling away, it looks a little bit less tempting than it was earlier on, right? Now with this kind of being one of the only damage, like you're losing damage options, right? And if it was targeted into something like that Urshifu, well, Chien-Pao, that's just going to be immune. So that's going to be something that even could waste the potential of a turn. But getting ahead of ourselves here. Instead, we have to see the Terrestrialization come on out. And with the Amoonguss staring down, you know, Incineroar on the opposing end into the Fairy-type Terrestrialization makes so much sense. Make sure you survive through this and get your own hits off. Incineroar down to less than half already. Poison as well for a little bit of extra damage on the line. Now, knock off. At least you will be able to break the sash on the Chien-Pao for further down the line. But again, with this Cresselia, a Psychic targeted into it doesn't do anything.
Psychic fails into the Qian Pao, the knockoff. We saw Colin take advantage of knocking off the Choice Scarf in an earlier match, but now Sebastian able to navigate the Urshifu out in the back with only a couple turns of Trick Room remaining. You know that you're eventually going to have to fight that Urshifu outside of Trick Room. You're not closing up this game in those last 2 turns of Trick Room. Meanwhile, Incineroar took a lot of damage on that last turn. Yes, Grass Terastallization prevents Spore, but it makes you weak to Sludge Bomb, and when that Sludge Bomb poisons on top, it means a lot of damage. And so yeah, at risk of just being KO'd by another Sludge Bomb, going to go out into the back, show us the Flutter Mane that's going to try to sweep outside of this Trick Room, but first going to have to take an Ice Shard, has to be worried about Choice Scarf Urshifu. Eventually, it's going to be very much an uphill battle.
At least it's not the double up. That was so much damage from the Ice Shard into this Flutter Mane. A double up could have been scary, but splitting the Dax does mean that both of these Pokemon make it through, and with the Lunar Blessing, almost back to full.
So a key thing here, you would normally worry about Amoonguss threatening the Flutter Mane with Spore, but the sequence here is going to be Spore, then Lunar Blessing, then Flutter Mane attack, means you would wake it up in the meantime. So you don't have to worry about that, but you would have to worry about damage. But no, it is Ice Shard and then Spore, so that sequence is going to work out for Colin.
Yeah, Flutter Mane, it falls asleep, but only for a moment. Lunar Blessing coming on out. So yeah, again, that damage that Qian Pao did, gonna get lessened, and that work that Amoonguss put in, I mean, Flutter Mane wakes right up, and now Flutter Mane, being the slowest in this current board position, moves last. Qian Pao just gets knocked out with the Dazzling Gleam.
Yeah, managing to use Flutter Mane in his own Trick Room. You can see Sebastian's reaction on the player cam to that Lunar Blessing coming out, just not a facet of that turn that he was thinking all the way through. It means that Flutter Mane is able to attack instead. And that Ice Shard got Flutter Mane pretty low. I wonder if Sludge Bomb would have been just enough damage to close this out. But one bad turn does not mean the end of the game. Sebastian still has that trump card and the Urshifu that's going to feel very difficult to deal with. But even if it beats the Flutter Mane, if you don't have an avenue for enough damage into the Cresselia, that throughout all these Lunar Blessings that have been more focused on healing the teammates have also healed the Cresselia all the way back up, you're going to have a problem because, you know, 2 Psychics will just KO that Urshifu. You don't have the Qian Pao that's immune to it anymore. So what that last Pokemon is and how much it can threaten Cresselia is probably a key piece of how this game is going to close out.
I'd be really interested to see what that Pokemon is. If it's going to be something that's a little bit more of an attacking option, or if it's something to try and set up the Urshifu to do even more. If it is something like that Pelipper that we praised this team for, to set up that rain and make sure the Surging Strikes can do even more damage. On this turn, though, Flutter Mane preserved, swap out Incineroar to hit the field once again. So if we see something other than a Surging Strikes from this Urshifu, well, that damage is going to be lowered thanks to this Intimidate as well. Incineroar could be soaking up a hit depending on how this plays out. And sure enough, we'll be taking this one. Surging Strikes going into this Incineroar with the Grass Terastallization. Certainly not as much damage, but with the poison will go down at the end of the turn. Going to be eyeing up what this Amoonguss is going to be doing, because now on this turn, an Icy Wind, trying to get a little bit of speed for Colin's end going on forward. Amoonguss is going to be the last act, but
So many options for speed control from Colin. The Trick Room wasn't enough. The knockoff didn't land into Urshifu to get rid of the Choice Scarf, but the Icy Wind will undo the speed advantage from the Choice Scarf. It means that, yes, Incineroar is paying the cost for this, going to switch in and immediately go down. But when Flutter Mane returns to the field, it's going to return to the field in which it is the fastest Pokemon. The problem for Colin is that there are 3 Pokemon left on Sebastian's side. That means it's as easy as bringing Urshifu out to the back to undo the speed drop onto Urshifu. When it comes back out, you won't have that play anymore. There's nothing to switch Flutter Mane back out to. So things seem like they're simplifying. We were so used to seeing them simplify in Colin's favor, where eventually the damage just feels inevitable. This time, it feels like it's going the other way. But there are still ideas. You can see Colin hovering the Trick Room here. If you can catch a switch out from the Urshifu with a Trick Room, that means when it comes back in, you have the speed advantage. After all, maybe that's the play, but no switches. The Amoonguss just protecting itself.
Yeah, Amoonguss stays safe through this turn. Dazzling Gleam coming out from this Flutter Mane. Amoonguss is going to avoid all of that damage. Urshifu not quite as fortunate. So Urshifu doesn't swap out, goes down, and it's going to be this Cresselia that's free to act on this turn. Not often you see it go to slow down the opponents and then go into this Trick Room, but try to set up for this later part of the game. Now we'll get the opportunity to see the 4th Pokemon for Sebastian. And with the Flutter Mane hitting the field, well, it's going to be an interesting Flutter Mane versus Flutter Mane face-off.
The good news for Sebastian is that his Choice Specs Flutter Mane has not had to choose an attack yet. Collins has already had to choose Dazzling Gleam, which means it's not threatening a KO into Flutter Mane on the other side. And the Trick Room means that this Amoonguss does move first, gets some Sludge Bomb damage back, but Lunar Blessing going to help keep both Pokemon on Collins' side pretty healthy.
Yeah, Lunar Blessing, you instantly just get that health back, and Flutter Mane almost back up to full. Dazzling Gleam, enough to take care of the Amoonguss, but as said, that's what you're locked into, and that's not nearly as much damage done on the opposing end. Sebastian still gets the opportunity to respond with his own, and something like this Shadow Ball is going to be so much more damage into the opposing end. Flutter Mane goes down, we're down to a 1v1.
We knew it had to be a pretty valuable Pokemon for Sebastian. We opted to let the Urshifu go down to Dazzling Gleam to preserve that last Pokemon in the back, and a valuable Pokemon indeed. A Flutter Mane able to lock into Shadow Ball and threaten so much damage against these final Pokemon for Colin.
The Psychic does so little, and in return, Shadow Ball does so much. Not enough for the KO, though. Psychic by itself not going to be enough, but the potential of a critical hit, if it can come through when Colin needs it the most, could be enough to be closing out the set. Hit comes through, not there. Flutter Mane, just a little bit of health left, and now can return with a Shadow Ball. This limits the margins, but it's going to be enough to get Sebastian the first game in this set.
Wow, what a close finish. It felt like there were little missteps along the way for each player, neither one able to establish a commanding position. You had things like the Fairy Terastallization on the Amoonguss, worried about Incineroar offense that never came and ended up making the Amoonguss much easier to take down with Dazzling Gleam. But ultimately, Sebastian had the right bits of speed control, forced one turn of passivity from Colin to switch the Flutter Mane out and sacrifice the Flutter Mane, the Incineroar rather, because of the threat of the Urshifu. And then when it came back in, was willing to give away that Urshifu because he knew he had the trump card, that Flutter Mane, the last Pokemon able to close out the game. Colin has been the one closing out games with Choice Specs Flutter Mane up till this point, but he faces a little bit of his own medicine with the checkmate of those Shadow Balls coming back from Sebastian.
I mean, we've gotten to see Flutter Mane close out games for Colin, but we've also gotten to see an Ursaluna more so in this early game that's been able to put in a lot more work and really absent from this game. As you called out, there was a couple of steps that Colin needed to take to get this Trick Room and this Ursaluna online. You got the Trick Room, that was the easy part, but Ursaluna switched in, instantly got KO'd, and Colin, right from the get-go in this match, was playing a 3v4 with a big key that was missing. So curious then, going on forward, do you still go into it?
Yeah, in retrospect, right, it's impressive that Colin even got it as close as he did after losing Urshifu so easily on turn 2. He's right back to it in this turn, and then you sort of think the easiest way to make the Trick Room and the Ursaluna happen is to both Trick Room and Parting Shot on this, or U-turn in this case, on the same turn, because then you've just solved it all at once. Just hit the home run. The risk of doing that is that you don't have any fake out support, you don't have any way to like help Cresselia stay around, because we saw how much Choice Specs Shadow Ball from Flutter Mane can do into Cresselia on the last turn. That plus a Surging Strikes probably just is a KO into Cresselia, so you can't be confident that you'd even get that Trick Room unless maybe you're willing to spend a Terastallization on Cresselia. That's not one that we've seen yet, and it doesn't even create any resistances for you, but it might be a way to make it happen. But yeah, this is a scary situation. If you're willing, though, to let Incineroar spin to fake out, then you know you can take a Shadow Ball, but you're back to the same problem of how do you get Ursaluna on the field.
Well, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. The first turn will be stopping this Urshifu. Fake out comes on through. Shadow Ball, so much damage into the Cresselia. But since it's only the one hit, we get that Trick Room up. But now we go back to your question. How do you get in this Ursaluna? Or do you just try and play out this board state as it is and see how much damage this Cresselia can do?
Yeah, if you're willing to let Cresselia go down, right, it's probably going to happen pretty quickly. You know Shadow Ball is coming in. There's no Amoonguss threatening Spore into your teammate this time that complicates things. So maybe you just fight from this situation. Say, I will take what you give me until you take a KO and let me bring Ursaluna on the field.
And I mean, when there is still this damage threat on Colin's side of the board, Sebastian, you can't afford to just play this too passively and let them do this damage. And going into this turn as well, this Incineroar, we can see it go more so on the offensive, starting off with the Flare Blitz. Urshifu on the other end, covering for the Terastallization in case it does want to go for the grass or just go for a swap. And the follow-up, get as much possible damage. Psychic, the follow-up, enough to take this Urshifu down.
Gets rid of Urshifu. We talked before the match that was one of the most valuable pieces for Sebastian, and it's gone in Trick Room, using the offense of these more supportive Pokemon.
And now follow-up Shadow Ball into Cresselia. That's been so low. Cresselia put in so much work in that game 1, but in game 2, Trick Room and going down might just be enough because now Ursaluna gets to hit the field freely and safely.
did it put that much work in game one? It certainly spent a lot of time on the field, but what did it do? I'm not sure it's bad for Colin that this time, instead of occupying his board without doing much for so long, it instead gets a KO with Psychic, more work than it did in game one, and then gets out of the way to let Ursaluna onto the field with still 3 turns left of this Trick Room. Now, you probably do have to spend the first of those turns of Trick Room just protecting the Ursaluna, because you're not yet burnt. You didn't get that full dream Trick Room and U-turn situation that results in a burned Ursaluna for the next turn, and you're under threat from Spore from the Amoonguss on the other side. But 1 turn of Protect, if you still have a couple turns of Trick Room left, that might be all you need. And meanwhile, Incineroar, already a grass type, knows it isn't worried about Spore, can go out on the offense against either of these Pokemon. Last time, this forced a Fairy Terastallization out of Amoonguss because Sebastian was worried about Flare Blitz from the Incineroar. We're just going to see how much he's still worried about, how much he values it. But for now, just a Protect from Ursaluna. Got to get through this first turn and get burned.
Yeah, apparently not valuing it enough this time around, but it will still be a Mushroom on the offense. Sludge Bomb again, spurt the poison into this Incineroar. Now, Incineroar will go on the offensive Flare Blitz, but it was never the target into the Amoonguss. Instead, into the Flutter Mane to bring it down to such low health. Shadow Ball once again, though. Again, Ursaluna never the target. Double up, but Incineroar, even if it is a survival, I hear the gasps out in the crowd. It's still gonna go down from the poison, don't worry.
You do kind of hate to see that for Colin. 2 games in a row, Incineroar is just bulky enough to hang on, except that Sludge Bomb had already burnt and will finish, or rather poisoned, and will finish that KO. The good news is, though, that Ursaluna is now burnt and is a big damage threat. The Flutter Mane hits the field fully healthy. You should be able to get quite a bit of damage out of the end of this. It is a little bit uncomfortable to have your Choice Specs Flutter on the field in Trick Room. Depending on what Sebastian's last Pokemon is, that could be a problem. But if they're, if the Flutter Mane on the other side for Sebastian is faster, then maybe it's not the end of the world. You don't have to worry about Spore as well. It's going to be the first thing to move. Flutter Mane can't protect itself, going to just have to take that.
I mean, even if it is a Flutter Mane that gets Spored, I think that Ursaluna is going to be just so much damage potential on this turn and really kind of has its pick of targets. You can target down the Amoonguss or just take care of the Flutter Mane. Headlong Rush. Now, you don't have to worry about your Flutter Mane, who's now asleep, going down from that Shadow Ball. You get rid of it. There's only 2 options left for Sebastian, that Amoonguss and 1 4th final Pokemon we haven't gotten to see quite yet.
I think a lot of players would be tempted to Facade there to see what's the biggest offense I can get. I don't want a little bit of red health on the Flutter Mane with my Ursaluna. I want the big target. But that's some defense through offense there. Because you prioritize getting the KO on the Flutter Mane, you know that you already were going to take that Spore, but nothing else happens on that turn. Now Chien Pao out onto the field. If you can get through that, well, maybe you're free and clear, but Chien Pao without a Focus Sash can go down to a single target. You've got to worry about Rage Powder in this situation. I think a very delicate endgame that probably also involves how long Flutter Mane spends asleep. Already spent 1 turn. If you can get a quick wake, if it wakes this turn and contributes to the fight, well, then Colin's in a really good position.
Well, Terastallization, a lot of the times we see it more on the defensive on the Chien Pao, but Stellar Terastallization instead. See if you can try and fish out for some of this offense, and Amoonguss to redirect a hit from the only damage potential you have still going on within this match. Sucker Punch with the boost of the Stellar Terastallization, targeting into the Flutter Mane is enough to take it down and bring Colin to only 1 Pokemon left. But again, this Ursaluna can deal so much damage, and it's forced to target into this Ursaluna. At least with the Facade, though, we'll get the full Brood of the attack for the 1-hit KO.
I think that's the last turn of the Trick Room, which just leads Ursaluna all on its own up against a Chien Pao that is ready to use the ice charge of its Stellar Terror. I mean, this is just over. The Terastallization has been used. There is nothing that's going to stop this Ice Spinner and a -1 defense Ursaluna from closing out this match.
The Ursaluna could have been such a threat, but waiting till the perfect time to strike, Ice Spinner from the Chien Pao takes it down, and with that, Sebastian Gonzalez 2-0 to move on within the finals at the Seattle Regional Championships. We had highlighted the experience of these trainers, this being a new peak, and yet again, he has shattered through to make it on to this next